is the 4th annual Nason Days Festival. 3 days of entertainment the whole family will enjoy, featuring a Civil War encampment, battles that will excite everyone, a tea and fashion show, and a Civil War ball complete with authentic music. There will be food, crafts, and craft demonstrations, and a car show as well. Travel back in time and experience our nation's history firsthand at the Nason Days Festival, September 10th through the 12th.
Most of you, when you think about the Civil War, you think it was some war that was fought over on the East Coast. You've all heard of the major battles that were over there. Nobody's ever given us credit from Southern Illinois as having anything to do with the Civil War. You all know what the Civil War was, don't you? And that was the Great Rebellion, in which was unlike other wars, the North fought the South. And I was born in Jackson County by Murfreesboro, Illinois in 1826. And at the age of 25, I moved to Franklin County to Benton, Illinois. You've all been to Benton, Illinois, haven't you? And I began practicing law there. And in 1858, after I was married in 1855, I became a U.S. congressman to move to Washington, D.C. And we did not want the South to secede. And the other issue, which came along later, was the issue of slavery. So I came to Southern Illinois, and with my support, half the people in Southern Illinois were for the South, half were for the North. And of my county, Franklin County, where I resided, we have a population of 10,000 people. That's about the size of Mount Vernon, Illinois. We had 1,200 men voluntarily enlist, with my support, to fight for the preservation of the Union, to fight for the North. Mr. Abraham Lincoln commissioned me to raise 15,000 men, which I resigned my post as congressman and trained at Fort Defiance in Cairo, Illinois. In 1862, the first major battle was fought at Fort Donelson, Memorial Day. It was a day initially to decorate the graves of the dead, those who had fallen during the Civil War. In my own county of Franklin, we had 1,200 men who enlisted, 209 were killed in battle. We have a monument there as a tribute to those men. After rallying support for the North, in 1862, Abraham Lincoln came out with the Emancipation Proclamation, which in essence freed slaves. Some of my men did not want to continue to fight. They were weary of the cause. I again rallied them to go back and fight for the preservation of the Union. Following the taking of Atlanta, I was with General Sherman on his great march to the sea, in which we came to Washington, D.C., and I led the Grand Review in front of President Lincoln, and we were given a standing ovation by the crowd. Did you know that without the support of us as Southern Illinoisans for the North, it's arguable that the Civil War could not have been won? People in Southern Illinois played a terrific role in that rebellion. I want to tell you about my gun. It was given to General John A. Logan by the Army of the Tennessee. Gave Mr. Logan this Colt revolver. It has an inscription from his friends in Jackson County. So this is a priceless gun, and it's an honor to hold it.
When they all marched out to go to First Manassas, they all had all kinds of gear. When they'd gone about a couple, 2 or 3 miles, it started showing up along the side of the road that soldiers didn't need that anymore. Anything from overcoats to armor that guys had bought or people had bought from home. But half of that is meat, and that is really a good cut of salt pork. That was issued to the troops. They'd cook it up, 3 days rations. They'd boil it, throw it in their knapsack or in their haversack and carry it with them and then eat it. Bread, it's kind of like bread. This is hardtack. This is some homemade hardtack, but it's hard flour, a little bit of baking powder, I believe, maybe just a touch of sugar. This is a lot softer than what you would have in the field, and this doesn't have any bugs in it. A lot of times this stuff would sit around in warehouses, and we've got the start of a real good week's meal here. We've got onions, we've got salt pork, we've got apples. A lot of times soldiers would prepare their own meals, and we didn't have mess halls like you have in the armed forces today. Although sometimes in camp they would have cooks that would prepare large quantities of food.
bring your hand around here in case the rifle will discharge as you're loaded. You probably won't lose any fingers. Then you pull the ramrod, ram it down, return it. Again, you use your pinky in case it fires. Then you take a percussion cap. It's one of these little things here. They have a little chemical in them that explodes when this hammer hits it. And it shoots a fire down through a little hole in here, and it sets off the powder and shoots the bullet like this. This is 58 caliber. That means it's 58 hundredths of an inch. Its bullet would be better than half an inch in diameter, and this is one that actually has been fired and flattened out. I found it over on one of those targets down there. Over 600,000 people were killed in the Civil War, but about 400,000 of them were killed by disease. So it was twice as dangerous to get 100,000 people together in one big camp than to take those same 100,000 people and go out and fight a battle. This is a bayonet. It's basically a knife that fits on a gun, so if you're unloaded and somebody's coming at you, you can stick them with it. Mostly bayonets were used as a tent stake or a candle holder. Less than 1,000 people were treated for bayonet wounds. There you go. It's heavy. Easy.
Put under the command of Robert E. Lee, and instead of using the large Seacoast guns they were used to shooting in South Carolina, they got switched to these. This is a 24-pound Coehorn mortar. It was developed in 1841 in Germany. 24-pound meant that if it was a solid shot, it weighed 24 pounds. They have a 5.5-inch bore. The actual guns do. These are reproductions. And with the right powder charge, they would go up to 1,200 yards, which is about where the school buses are parked. This is a worm. It's like a steel spring with pointed ends. They use that to clean out anything left from the round they fired before. Puts it down in, twists it. There's nothing in there right now because this gun hasn't fired today. Sponge, which is basically a round sponge on the end of a stick. Get it wet. If there's any burning embers left down in the breech of that gun when you put the next round in, it will go off. The rounds we're shooting today are just 4 ounces of black powder. Just a blank. Ram, he takes the ramrod, seats the round into the breech. Ready to piece means he takes a brass rod called a pick, punches a hole in the round to expose the powder, puts a primer in. Modern day cannon primers are 22 caliber black powder blanks. And then the number 2 man gets the lanyard ready, tells him, he tells me that the gun is ready to fire. Come to the ready! Make sure your ears are covered correctly. Fire!
Because we don't have a wash and dryer or a dishwasher, the gals do all their dishwashing here. All of our meals are cooked on our open fire. We had, like she said, biscuits and gravy this morning. That was a typical breakfast if we could get it. The ladies were allowed to bring hat boxes, their clothes, heavy trunks.
6th Cavalry Company F, Illinois. These uniforms are exact replicas of Civil War era, same material, same pattern, same stitching. The yellow trim indicates cavalry. As you go through the different units, they'll have different colored stripes, and the hats are party hats. They have sabers indicating cavalry. This particular saber is exact same length and width as Civil War issue. The belts and shoulder harness for the saber are Civil War era, as well as buckle. The soldier also had a 36 caliber Colt Navy revolver version, black powder, 6-shot. Horses are equipped with duplications of tack. This saddle here has more detail. It is a officer's McClellan. Both of them, all three of them are McClellans. It is padded. The enlisted soldier saddle is not padded. That is rawhide. The average weight of a fully tacked cavalry saddle is 55 pounds.
Come over on the other side, see, and do the same thing. Brush the impurities of that steel from the surface. And when I brush that steel with that brass, it'll transfer the brass into the surface of that steel. And we'll quench it there in the water, seal that brass right into the surface of that steel. See, you can watch it here now. It's beginning to turn. You can watch it. See, every time I stroke it with the brush, it's getting brighter and brighter and brighter. And it will keep doing that as long as it stays about that heat range.
The fans would be used like this, especially for balls, if we're very dressy affairs. With this is made of ostrich feathers. This one is a wooden one. These are sharpshooters. And because there was no air conditioning, the only way you could keep yourself cool during that era is to fan yourself. And so this would be more of a day fan, where these would be for evening. A long time. And I can attest to the fact, now I'm also, one thing that we don't have out here, wearing a corset. Were you familiar with the way women would wear corsets and they would lace them up in the back? I am wearing one of those. And you would try to tighten them up as much as possible to get your waist really, really thin. They say even young girls at a very young age would start wearing corsets. And even like a 5-year-old little girl, that they would start wearing these because it was very fashionable to keep yourself very, very thin. It can also be very uncomfortable and not healthy. It shows women really tightening them in and in until their waist got really thin, could even distort their ribs a little bit.
They are milking shorthorns. They're milking shorthorns. Our ancestors would have called them Durhams, and they're one of the oldest ox breeds that there is. Now, they weigh about 2,200 to 2,400 pounds. They eat 5 gallons of grain a day, and they each eat a bale of hay every day. They're a team of oxen. An ox is any cow that's trained to pull, and that's what they are. 150 years ago, this is what our ancestors liked to use instead of horses, because they could travel farther, you could train them sooner, and they're just a lot better animal for pulling wagons than the horse was. Now, they are slower. Contrary to what you see in the movies, if your parents decided to go from Illinois to California, that meant you got to walk from Illinois to California, because all the equipment went in the wagon, and the only time you got to go in the wagon is whenever you went to sleep.
In 1864 was when the Civil War was going on. You guys heard of the Civil War? Yeah, well, that was a long time ago. In the Civil War, they wore uniforms like this. They didn't have camouflage. They didn't wear green and that kind of stuff. This is what they looked like. The dark blue coats and the light blue pants. This is a model 1861 cavalry saber, and I got a sword knot here so I don't drop it when I use it. And this is used against men on foot. If I were on my horse and he's down there, I try to stick him with that. And what I do before I get to him, I pull this pistol out and I get ready for him. And if I miss him with a sword, I shoot him as I go by. The model 1860 Colt 44 caliber cap and ball.
They're nothing like what is carried now. They are used with black powder, loose powder, and separate bullets poured down in here, placed here, tamped down, each one round by round, then loaded with caps like these on the ends of each one of these. And it takes several minutes to load each one. And because of that, because loading one of these in the middle of a fight when somebody's trying to kill you is kind of difficult, a lot of the men, if they could afford it, if they were wealthy enough and could afford more than one pistol, might carry 2 or 3 or 4 on their belts when they go into combat, all loaded. They didn't have clips, they didn't have automatics, they didn't have anything like that. That's what they had to do. This is an example of another popular sword of the era. This is a model 1840 cavalry saber carried in the Mexican War, also used in the Civil War. What I'm wearing is called a shell jacket. It's a short jacket, so it makes it easy to get on a horse, so I don't have all of that stuff in my way. So I can wear this and ride my horse with all my equipment. I'm also, absolutely, easier to get everything to everything. I'm also wearing riding pants, and you can't see them very well, but cavalry boots here.
Do you know that there's a very good possibility that Abraham Lincoln actually used this vest to ride on in the courthouse up here in Mount Vernon? This came out of the courthouse in Mount Vernon. I'm Abraham Lincoln. You know who he was? Well, probably not. That's probably before your time, okay? Abraham Lincoln was born Hodgenville, Kentucky, 1809, February the 12th, and he lived there till he was about 7 years old. Abraham Lincoln moved to Indiana when he was about 7 years old. He lived there till he was about 20 years old. He helped his father build a log cabin there. Thomas Lincoln built another cabin, but by this time Abraham Lincoln's 21 years old. So he said, "Dad, I'm a grown man now. I can go on my own." And he did. He went over to New Salem. At New Salem he became a surveyor, a postmaster, store clerk, worked in a sawmill, worked in a grist mill. And while he was there, he carried the post office in his hat. When the mail would come in, Abraham Lincoln would put the letters in his hat, put the hat on his head, and as he went about town, when he saw somebody that had some mail, he'd take his hat off and give him his letter. What they're reenacting out there today with all those cannons and those horses and those guns, do you know how many people died during the Civil War? 600,000. That's a lot of people. That's more people than died in World War I and World War II and Korea and Vietnam and all the other wars that the United States has been engaged in combined.
So, it was Dr. Mudd's house that he went to and showed up that night, kind of all dirty and grungy, and he said that he had fallen, his horse had rolled, and he had broken his ankle. Well, now, have all of you heard about when John Wilkes Booth broke his ankle? Most people all know about the fact that John Wilkes Booth broke his ankle. Most people say it was when he leapt from the box onto the stage. It was a 12-foot jump. But John Wilkes Booth grew up on a farm. He was a very athletic actor. This was nothing for him to jump 12 feet. And actually, there were about 200 people, at least, in the theater that night. All of them wrote accounts. There were books written on nothing but accounts of the assassination. None of them mentioned the fact that he limped off the stage or that he had any problem getting off the stage. They say that he turned, faced the audience, that he turned, ran off. He actually had to fight himself off the stage because the other actors tried to stop him. How that story got started was this man showed up at Dr. Mudd's house. Dr. Mudd was extremely scared of what might happen to him for harboring the assassin of the President of the United States. He didn't know this necessarily when Booth showed up, but he certainly knew it by the time he came back and ordered them off of his property. He didn't turn them in, he just told them to leave. And then he neglected to tell the government anything about this little situation that was going on at his farm. He told 3 different stories. which is actually probably how he ended up being imprisoned for the time that he was, because he came forward with no real information and he kept telling different stories. So you have all these different stories, so no one believed any story that he said. So the general concept that Mr. Booth broke his leg when he jumped from the theater became a popular story. To begin the fashion show presentation, we're going to start with dressing Mrs. Surratt from her morning attire. Now, as we see Mrs. Surratt right now, she's just woken up from bed and she has put on her preliminary underpinnings and is wearing her dressing gown, which she would wear around the house. The dressing gown is actually a Madeline wrapper and is actually illustrated in the 1860s fashion plate. She's already put on her crinoline for the day, what we now call hoops, and this is actually a flounced crinoline, because it already has lines of ruffles around it, which thus means that she does not have to wear a petticoat over the crinoline to soften it out. And then she has her drawers. Now her drawers are actually split drawers. They're actually like two tubes that come all the way out and fasten at the waistband. Then she's put a chemise on, and the chemise goes all the way down, and it's like a full slip. This goes underneath her corset. And the corset is actually, the major portion of the corset is utilized to create a soft, curvaceous flow to the body. To get the proper form of the 1860s, the corset actually brings the body in, reducing the waist, and actually supporting the woman's bosom, which holds everything in place and creates the silhouette that is so sought after in the period. It's laced up the back. It actually has the clips in the front. Once the corset is adjusted properly, the lady should be able to undo it and put it back, take it off and put it on with the front clips only. The art of corseting oneself into an extremely small waist is actually not totally authentic. Some ladies who were very vain did do that, but it was more of a support item and also to give the proper fit to the fitted bodices that were so popular during the period. Now, over all of this, she has a corset cover. The corset cover actually acts as a one to keep the bodice cleaner and to keep the corset from rubbing against the bodice. Then she puts her crinoline on again, and this is the end of her underpinnings. This is everything that you put on before you put on your dress. You'll see on the skirt that the stripes go horizontal and vertical. They go vertical, going around, and then you're going to have the horizontal on the bottom. This makes the whole bottom of the skirt look wider. And the entire concept of this period was to make the skirt's bottoms look wide, to make the waist look small. During the period, glass buttons, bone buttons, and metal shank buttons were the most common and most favored. Wooden buttons were not popular. They only came in during the late war when there was a lack of glass and metal to be found to make the buttons with. So your metal shank buttons and your glass buttons are certainly the most common, especially when you're putting together a nice dress like this. Now, a couple other things to note. Mrs. Surratt has been widowed for several years, but she is a widow nonetheless. White is an inappropriate color for her ever to wear again. Her dress is in a subdued red, and she still wears a lot of black accents. But her jewelry, which we'll see here, the earrings, and then her bracelet, you can see the hair comb. These are all made out of gutta percha, which was first experiments in vulcanizing of rubber, the earliest forms of plastics. And these are all pieces of mourning jewelry, which a lady would start wearing when she was in mourning, when you could wear nothing of any color, when you wore the deep black, and you could have no ornamentation on your jewelry even. And it carries over, watch on, and now she's putting her hat on. During the 1860s, there was a dawning of a new fashion in headgear. The bonnets of the 1850s started to give way to more fashionable hats. And the hats could be as elaborate as one chose, not necessarily matching the ensemble that the lady was wearing. So you would have the hat, the veil in back was very common. Sometimes you'd have a veil all the way around. If you had a veil all the way around, they were usually continuously one unison length. And then she has her carriage parasol, which actually folds, and the top of it, when she's riding in a carriage, depending on how the sun goes, actually tilts to shield her face from the sun. And she has her reticule, and she is all ready to step out for the afternoon and visit and go calling in the neighborhood.
He has his low crown bowler on, and it is 100% wool felt. Gentleman would always wear his hat out to protect his face from the sun.
Mr. Lincoln was commonly known to wear predominantly black, somber, and rather severe clothing. Now, Mr. Lincoln is also wearing the frock coat, which was actually extremely popular during the 1860s. This was the general coat for men's wear. He's wearing all three the pants, the vest, and the frock coat are all of the same fabric. That was something that was actually fairly uncommon, except for the extremely conservative gentlemen who would wear a very severe one color here, like Mr. Lincoln's wearing.
The jacket I'm wearing is a shell jacket of Civil War era. The stripes and piping indicate cavalry. The hat is a hardy. The sabers on the front indicate cavalry, and as does cords.
2 or 3 years, except everybody wore wool, which is not too uncomfortable.
Plain old cotton button type suspenders. My jacket is a frock, all wool.
This is a ball gown. This is commonly worn after, after 3 p.m.? After 3 p.m., ladies could wear a ball gown. Gentlemen didn't wear their tailcoats until after 6. The women wore the crinolines, or the hoops, but so did the children. Children during everyday play wear might not necessarily wear them. A lot of times their skirts and dresses were much simpler. It's interesting to note that short sleeves were common for young ladies. We have the soft pinks and contrasted with the blue here. And we have what's called a pagoda sleeve. It's a large oversleeve, and then ladies would have undersleeves underneath them. The undersleeves could then be removed for washing, and the undersleeve would only come up to here. So the ladies' dress would not become too soiled. They just washed this. You didn't wash your clothes every time you wore them. Fortunate things of the period are the piping, create contrast. Sometimes they'd be done in the same fabric, but they emphasize the shoulders. And the caps actually bring the shoulders down even more. And then we have the wide pagoda sleeves. Pagoda sleeves actually originated in the 1850s. They were very much a carryover from the 1850s. The mature lady of the period found them in favor, although the two-part sleeve or coat sleeve was also coming into popularity during that period. She actually has a ruffle here around, which comes out and kind of stands out around the bottom of the bodice. This is called a peplum. You'll see this over and over again in the period, especially in tea bodices and calling dresses. This is not something that the lady would sit around the house in. This is not anything that the lady would work in. So just keep remembering the wide to narrow, and again, you'll see it in the back. The wider to narrow, the drop shoulders, pagoda sleeves, the bands around the skirt. You'll see here she actually has the tuck pleats. A little bit later period here, and we'll show you a couple of the differences that are really key in this dress. She has what's called the leg of mutton sleeve. This looks like the leg of leg of lamb. You've got the large part up here, and that's the large picture hats like this are of a much more of the what we call the Gilded Age.
Typical shoes of the period, brogans, the square-toed shoes.
Stay right there. Hello? Stay right there. Hello? Pick.